For generations, one rule has defined naval strategy: control the Straits, and you control commerce. Control commerce, and you shape the fate of states. This week, the Black Sea didn't just become contested. It became a case study in how geography, treaty law, and military reality can override political intent. Here's the key. The Black Sea isn't simply a body of water. It's a corridor tied to energy flows, grain exports, and NATO's ability to project presence in Eastern Europe. And the constraint that matters most sits at the mouth of the sea. Turkey controls access through the Bosporus and Dardanelles under the Montreux Convention. So tonight, I want to answer one question clearly. What happens when a major power can credibly raise the cost of entry, while the gatekeeper controls the door? To understand the Black Sea, you need three facts that don't change with headlines. Fact 1. Russia is a blaze sea power with extensive coastline and major naval infrastructure. Fact 2. Turkey holds the Straits, and the Montreux Convention gives Ankara broad control over warship access, including restrictions for non-Black Sea states. Fact 3. Much of Europe's energy and commodity exposure isn't theoretical. Parts of the system physically route through this region. For example, TurkStream, 2 parallel lines, has been widely reported with total capacity around 31.5 BCM per year, running under the Black Sea from Russia to Turkey. This is why just send ships is not a simple policy lever. It's constrained by treaty, by geography, and by escalation risk. How we got here. The current Black Sea posture didn't emerge in a vacuum. It sits on decades of tension about borders, spheres of influence, and NATO expansion. From the late 1990s onward, NATO enlarged in multiple rounds, including 1999 and the large 2004 expansion. And after 2014, the Ukraine crisis became a defining fault line, an issue that major scholars framed as a predictable great power collision point. John Mearsheimer argued in 2014 that Western policy, especially NATO expansion dynamics, played a central role in creating the crisis environment. You don't have to agree with his conclusion to recognize the strategic logic he's describing. Maritime control becomes risk control. Here's the first operational shift. Even without a single dramatic door slam moment, the practical effect can be the same. If a Navy can build a credible denial envelope through layered air defense, anti-ship systems, surveillance, and strike capability, then access becomes conditional. That doesn't require an announcement that convinces everyone. It only requires one thing: risk becomes expensive. And when risk becomes expensive, insurers, shippers, and governments adjust, sometimes before the public even notices. This matters because the Black Sea has been deeply linked to grain logistics. Before the full-scale war, Ukraine exported around 60 million metric tons of grain per year, with estimates that over 90% departed via Black Sea ports. Source: if maritime risk rises, exports reroute or shrink, and that pushes prices and political pressure across regions. Fast forward to the post-2022 environment: sanctions, military aid, and a prolonged war. And despite expectations of collapse, the IMF raised Russia's 2024 growth forecast to 3.6% in one widely reported update, suggesting adaptation rather than immediate economic failure. Source: that context matters because it informs how Moscow may calculate risk and leverage, including in maritime zones. Here's the first operational shift. Even without a single dramatic door slam moment, the practical effect can be the same. If a Navy can build a credible denial envelope through layered air defense, anti-ship systems, surveillance, and strike capability, then access becomes conditional. That doesn't require an announcement that convinces everyone. It only requires one thing: risk becomes expensive. And when risk becomes expensive, insurers, shippers, and governments adjust, sometimes before the public even notices. This matters because the Black Sea has been deeply linked to grain logistics. Before the full-scale war, Ukraine exported around 60 million metric tons of grain per year, with estimates that over 90% departed via Black Sea ports. If maritime risk rises, exports reroute or shrink, and that pushes prices and political pressure across regions. Now to the player most people underestimate: Turkey. Under Montreux, Turkey has specific rights and obligations about warship transit. That framework has repeatedly shaped Black Sea access since the convention was signed. Source. So Turkey's leverage isn't just diplomatic, it's legal and geographic. That means NATO decision-making is not simply what Washington wants or what Brussels votes. It is also what Ankara allows, and what Ankara calculates is in its interest. In practical terms, that can translate into limits on escalation and a preference for managed stability, because uncontrolled escalation turns the Straits from an advantage into a liability. This is where the Black Sea becomes more than a regional story. Pillar 1. Western naval projection has been a core tool of deterrence for decades, but in constrained seas, with a gatekeeper Straits regime and a high-density denial environment, projection isn't guaranteed. It's negotiated. Pillar 2. Financial coercion, sanctions, reserve freezes, payment access, has been another major Western tool. But when large states and blocs invest in alternatives, coercion becomes less decisive over time. We've seen sustained debate around alternative payment rails and local currency settlement systems in the broader geopolitical landscape. The key analytical point is not the dollar is ending tomorrow. It's that coercive tools face diminishing returns as counterparts adapt. Now let's do the ledger, the way markets do. If maritime risk rises in the Black Sea, Europe's exposure shows up in 3 places. 1. Energy routing pressure, especially where infrastructure ties into the region's geopolitics. TurkStream's presence underscores why Europe's energy story remains entangled with Black Sea dynamics. 2. Food and commodity prices, because Black Sea grain logistics shape global supply expectations. Pre-war Ukrainian grain export scale helps explain why disruptions matter beyond Europe. Source. 3. Security spending and political stress, because when a region becomes harder to access, deterrence gets more expensive. And that's the part people often miss. Even if nothing new happens tomorrow, risk pricing can change today. When policymakers face a constrained theater, they usually cycle through 3 types of options. Option A, challenge access directly, high escalation risk, treaty constraints, and high operational cost. Option B, compensate with airlift or logistics, expensive and politically difficult at scale. Option C, negotiate managed access, often politically uncomfortable, but sometimes the only stable path. The Black Sea is a reminder that not every problem has a clean, forced solution. Sometimes the constraint is structural, chokepoints, treaties, and geography. And for NATO, the strategic question becomes, how do you maintain credibility when entry is constrained, and when escalation carries nuclear-level risk? Final verdict, the Black Sea is not just a battlefield. It's a geopolitical instrument shaped by geography, treaties, and credible deterrence. If access becomes conditional, Europe's logistics and energy assumptions get stress-tested fast. And NATO's challenge is not headlines. It's the hard reality of operating inside constraints it doesn't fully control. That's the Geostrat Outlook. I'm Ava Sterling. This is World Power Briefing. For generations, one naval rule prevailed. Control the Straits, control the commerce, shape the fate of states. Tonight, the Black Sea is our case, not as a headline, as a structural constraint. The Black Sea isn't just water, it's energy routing, it's grain logistics, it's military access and deterrence. The biggest constraint sits at the gate. Turkey controls the Straits, Bosporus and Dardanelles, under the Montreux Convention. Source. So here's the core question. What happens when entry becomes expensive and the gatekeeper controls the door?